Alright, welcome back. I hope you're having a good day. I'm going to take a look at some of my Bougainvillea today. Almost a year since I've updated you guys on these. A few of them have gone through some health issues, just some kind of ugly times. None of them really took the hurricane all that well, except for this one, because they are recovering, and I think a couple of them just need a little pruning. I'm going to prune this one up a little bit. The only plant that I took inside during the hurricane, and it was, it was one of these things of, but this one, because of, it's in a really small pot, really shallow pot, and just the way I have it sitting, to keep it from kind of getting tipped over in the wind a bunch, I have it in a plant stand, resting up against my wall, kind of on my front entry area, and just as I was going to, somebody else's house to ride out the storm, I just kind of realized that whole plant stand might fall over, and I brought in the whole plant stand and just put it right inside the door. So this was the only plant that actually stayed inside. It was not blooming at that time. And, but since the hurricane came through, we've had some weather where it's not quite as humid. For some reasons, I see some of these plants in the landscape that bloom all year long. Mine seem to bloom just like when it's really dry. They seem to bloom better through the winter and the early spring than they do through the summer. And this one's getting its nice little wintertime blooms on here. The small white spots are actually the blooms. And these are magenta. I've called them purple before, but I'm actually going to pull in my purple ones later, and they do look quite a bit more purple than this one. But these are called bracts. And then the white part in the middle are actually the bloom. Most people mistake the colors for the actual blooms. But this one I haven't wired up any of my Bougainvillea yet. This one I have this kind of a windswept look going to it. When I initially repotted it into this pot, which has now been, I think, right around 2 years, I actually, I let it grow in a pot that had actually gotten an escape root, and it actually sat there for, I don't know, probably a year and a half in that pot. And then when I pulled it out, I actually took and broke all of these this way. I've tried to repeat it in some of my other plants, and I just really haven't had a repeat kind of success like that. It just seemed, at that time they were still flexible. I was thinking about, could I wire them, could I not? And then I just, took them all and just kind of broke them all this way, and they held. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of prune this guy up a bit. It's getting some, budding along the trunk some, or not the trunk, but just deeper back on the branches. And I don't want it to keep getting longer and longer. I like the look of it like this, but I don't want it to get really any longer than that. So basically, I'm just going to kind of cut all the bracts off. And on some of these, there's some long parts. Like this one, I'm going to leave that on there, but I'll just cut this longer piece off and leave that just bloom there. It'll still have a little interest in it. We're getting, I've actually gotten several compliments on this guy. It's one of the only trees that I keep out front. And all the door-to-door roofing people and everything keep stopping by, and they keep complimenting on how nice it looks sitting there. And then that. All right, and that should do it. Just kind of compact it down a little. These guys always grow all winter long. We don't really get a winter, but everything else slows down. Seems like these guys do really well through the winter. So hopefully it'll get another flush. All right, and then there's this guy. This guy's actually bouncing back from the hurricane really well. It actually blew it. This one kind of pulled a little bit of a Mary Poppins in that it actually got separated from its pot. This is the same size pot that it was in. It's just a bulb training pot. But I never even found the original pot that was in it. This was in the middle of the yard. But I hadn't done a video on them in a long time, just because this guy looked really ratty like all summer long. It seemed like just as soon as I made the video before, it just started looking like worse and worse as things went on. But you can see, see these that look red, and then these up here have that magenta look. These are just starting to color up, just starting to get some leaves on here. I think since I have it in and just kind of wanted to show you how they're doing, I'm going to go ahead and get the weeds out of here. Alrighty, so I got the weeds up out of there. after the first year, like it really looked very nice in the last video. The only other video I have of the Bougainvillea, it looked really great. And then, you know, like I said, ever since then, it just really hasn't looked all that good. After the storm, this one branch came out and it, you know, got the color on there first. They're a little long and leggy now, so I'm just going to cut that back. And then I'm just going to kind of take a look at everything else. Like I said, with that other one, I was able to kind of bend the branch, and I could hear the, you know, the cracks in the branches when I bent that over like that. And so some of these I'm just going to see if I can kind of move them a little bit, make sure there's no crossing branches. This branch will, I mean, I might be able to get a little wire on that one day. I don't think I'm going to wire up the Bougainvillea. I keep saying I'm not going to wire up my thorn plants, and then I'll wind up doing it sooner or later anyway. And go ahead and just remove that older bract there. And I think for now it looks pretty good. I'll just let that finish recovering, since it hasn't really colored up yet. Got a couple of those longer pieces out of there. All right, and then this was another one that I had, you know, picked up off the clearance rack. When I get the weeds cleaned up, I'll show you a couple of the features that I really like about it on the trunk. Definitely the one that I have with the biggest trunk. And the other video that I made of it, I actually used this one for the thumbnail. Had just huge, you know, big beautiful blooms on this whole thing. Was just looking so nice. And just like that, you know, the other magenta one, just kind of has looked like crap ever since. Before I get the weeds out on this one, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of mention, you can see that the leaves are kind of yellowish. I guess that's a sign of chlorosis, although now it seems to be growing a little bit better. It had the signs of this before the storm, and I added, there's a bagworm, or a plaster worm, I guess some people call them, but I added some Bougain to it that's supposed to help fight the chlorosis, and then, you know, it really just got kind of beat the hell in the storm. It didn't really blow anywhere like the other one did. It just lost all of its leaves, and, you know, just got completely defoliated by the wind. And now it's just kind of, it really is just very super leggy. And I'm gonna cut off a few of these. You know, like there's a branch coming in that direction there, and then just comes straight up there, trying to get it to maybe go that way instead of just over top of the trunk. But just going to cut it all way back, because, you know, this one's just now starting to color up a little bit too. But I try to let, you know, a tree be a tree and try to let the vine be a vine. But I don't really want a big trunk like that and then just like a whole bunch of little skinny branches going way out. When it was blooming in the spring, that was early spring, I think it was even January, February when I originally made this video. Actually, it's I went and looked, and I published that video 320 days ago. And I believe that would put that in early January, maybe. So maybe if I cut it back like this now, I was going to say, try to save some growth on that one, but it's actually coming right out next to another growth there. So I'm just going to take that, eliminate that one. Alright, clean the weeds out of here. Alright, and so that's the last of the magenta ones. And before I go get them, I did want to show you one of my favorite features on it. And I just really like the trunk. It's got this hollow here. And I've been trying to, just trying to come up with a plan of how I'm going to repot it and use that some. It is all the way right at the base of the dirt right now. And then all the foliage is, you know, way up away from it. When I made that video, when it was at its healthiest, I had only had this tree for like, I think around a year. And they had told me that they had just repotted them before they put them up on sale like that. I didn't feel like it was ready for a repot right then. Maybe this spring if it does gain a lot of health from what it looks like now. But we'll just see what it looks like at that time. Alright, and then my last couple are the actual purple color instead of the magenta. I have under the impression that these actual blooms aren't quite as white as the other ones are. I think they're like a little more of a, just kind of a pale yellowish. Maybe it's something that I just kind of see in person that you guys may not notice as much. I'm very happy to see, this guy blooming. I found this separated from its pot, and I can just kind of show you it's very root bound. I have actually been planning on trying to maybe do an exposed root with this one, just because of the way I remember the roots looking with the last time I could actually see them. Now that it's all root bound like that, it's really kind of hard to see the structure of the stump on the way in there. Small trunk. Thinking about doing almost like a look like the other one, that first one, the first magenta one, but instead of a windswept, just kind of keeping this one just like a little more of a cloud of foliage up top. And even though I've been happy it's been blooming, I can't really quite figure out why it's losing all of the apical branches here. Not losing them, it's just getting no growth there. A lot of this newer stuff is actually, like this, has actually come out of the trunk. That's a recent sprout. And it's actually coming out of the bottom of the trunk. It's not coming up on the top here at all. When these things did get beat up in the storm, and I say that the storm like defoliated them, like there's some of them where it looked a little more like, instead of the wind blowing all the leaves off, it almost looked like somebody took a blowtorch and just like burned everything off of it. And so maybe that's why some of them just aren't coming back. So at this point, all of this stuff is really just dead growth. This has a little tiny branch, a little tiny leaf coming out of the end, but still probably wasn't even worth keeping that long branch there. So after I take all this dead stuff off, it's kind of really disappointing too, because like up on top here, the woody part of the branches up here has a ton of lichen growing on it, kind of giving it that older look. But then it seems to be kind of, not really dying from the top down, but it just seems to have lost some of these top branches and then just getting the growth down lower. And then, just some of these longer ones, I don't really need anything out there all that long. A couple in here again, just kind of crossing themselves. And I think I'll just leave it like that for now. See what else comes back. Tried to leave some of the parts where it was just coloring up a little. Alright, so now that I cut most of that purple off, it's a little bit of an ugly duckling there, but that gives you a little bit of a better look of the age of the bark that's on there, even though it is a very, thin tree. Alright, and this is the last one. This one's purple as well. This one, honestly, I was ready to give up on this guy before the storm even came. All summer long, it just really looked terrible, but I see, sometimes I see people in plant forums, I ask, oh, I think my plant might be dying, what should I do? And I always just keep watering it and keep giving it a shot until I'm sure it's dead, and it never really died completely. I'm going to take those off because those look really old and ratty now. And then I was happy, the thing that was making me happy, it's got a nice little stump on it. I'll show you guys a close-up of that in a minute. It's got some uniqueness to it. But then, it had some, movement on the way up, big trunk movement, and then plenty of branching coming off of it. And in that video, it was all purple, looked really nice too. I don't know, let me see if I can give you guys a look here. Like even, it started coloring up, down low first, but now in the higher up branches, it's getting some buds. But it's still just kind of weak, and since we are, even though these seem to do better with the less humidity, we are still heading into a time where there's going to be less light, less heat and everything. So what I'm going to do is just kind of cut it back some, and about halfway on some of these longer leggy ones, and some of the longer branches also look kind of beat up. This was a new growth, and I was so happy I got it to kind of come back and balance the tree back out. That was actually where it started looking bad at first. So cut a little piece of that off. Hopefully it'll keep going that way. I did find a few of these branches were broken. Broken but clinging on to life because they kind of broke and was just hanging out there on the branch next to it. Alright, and then take a look at the base here. And from some angles it looks just like it's got a really, see from that angle it just kind of looks thick, but then it looks a little kind of strangely dimensional. When you really get to looking at it, it almost looks like it's got a knuckle like you would have on a bald cypress. And I think that's just where it broke off. This was originally in my yard, just kind of in a bad spot. I had it at a spot where the utility guys would kind of step on it and everything. With the new growth coming in down here, those little buds coming in all in through here, and then me cutting it back, I do think it'll look good again this spring. Hopefully, maybe January, February, I can give you guys a big update on all these, and they all look great.